Today we're looking at Abigail. So we're taking a break in our series on the Psalms, and because it's Mother's Day. So actually, Sheila and I have been conspiring for about a month to do Deborah. Well, we're not doing Deborah today. Sorry, Sheila. Yeah, but we've done this in the past because we looked at Deborah. Was it last year, year before? I can't remember. Year before on Mother's Day, and because it's just really fun to go back to the Old Testament and take a look at some, actually the New too, of some really notable women, because today in Mother's Day we're thinking more about women in our lives because of our mothers, but you go back and you look in the Old Testament. I got to tell you, if you don't know the story of Deborah, you have to know the story of Deborah. It's just a fantastic. So we were tempted to just replay it today because it's just spine-tinglingly cool. Deborah's just way cool. And then, Dorothy and I got talking, and we have a favorite list of women in the Old Testament too, and Abigail's one of them. So if you don't know Abigail, today you will. So we're going to do it in a really simple style. We're going to look at the narrative. We're going to just look at the story. And then at the end, using all of your skilled observational powers, we're going to draw some conclusions about her, because it's just an astonishing story. So mostly today, we're going to look at just that story. Before we do that, yes, we had all of our children here. There they are, which is something of a small miracle, because we're talking Sandy, Utah, Valdosta, Georgia, Denver, Colorado, and Fairbanks, Alaska. So we had, it's kind of fun. We did a minor conspiracy to get Dorothy to a restaurant Friday night, and we turned the corner into the back room, and there was all of our children from the entire country. So it's kind of fun. So we're just very grateful. It's been a really fun time. It just doesn't happen that often when they spread out that far. So Mother's Day, Abigail, she is a mother. She qualifies, so we'll do that. That's okay. But if you don't know the story of Abigail, I call it grace that acts. And she does something extraordinary in a circumstance that happens in the Old Testament. It'll be in 1 Samuel 25, but we're going to have the whole passage here, actually the whole chapter on here. And she's made in the image of God. And I'll talk about that conclusion when we get done, okay? So as we make our observation. So here's what I want you to do. What I want you to do is, as we go through the entire story of Abigail, which is just riveting, it'd make a great movie. I got to tell you, it'd make a great movie. I want you to keep track of Abigail as she does what she does, and keep track of how she is exhibiting a quality of God in what she does, okay? So just sit back, and we'll do the movie version of this. Here we are. We're in 1 Samuel 25. Then David arose, went down to the wilderness of Paran, and there was a man of Maon whose business was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep. That's a lot. And 1,000 goats. That's a lot. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. And now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. So here's the whole setup for the story. David is in this time of his life where he's no longer a major general of the army for Saul. He's no longer that, because he and Saul have had a falling out, and Saul thinks he's trying to take over the kingdom. So Saul's trying to kill him. Saul's running in the desert, and so this is the period of time where he's running from Saul for his life, but he hasn't become king of Israel yet. It's a really desperate time. While he's running, it turns out he's got a lot of good buddies who were in the military with him when he was a major general. I mean, like top of the military for Saul. A lot of these guys who were very loyal to him. So now that he's out hiding in the desert, he's not hiding alone anymore. There are hundreds of these armed men with him. And they're roving in the southern reaches of Israel, just trying to stay away from Saul and his army. That's the context for David. He's not king yet, but he is surrounded by a lot of good friends, and his good friends have swords. Okay? Now we are in an area of Paran. Do you remember the story of the Exodus, and where finally after the 40 years in the wilderness, they send spies up to look at the land just before they go in the land? They leave from a wilderness area called Paran. It's actually the lower edge of Israel before you get in the worst of the desert. So we're way down in the south. It's desert area. By the way, there's a couple cities mentioned here, actually villages, Carmel and Maon. If you go on Google Earth and you type in Maon or Carmel, Israel, they are still there today. What? Yes, indeed. So we'll talk about. In fact, let me look at it right here. Here's Israel with the present-day borders. The Paran area is just about 15 miles west of the Dead Sea. So it's right around in that area. It's very dry. It's very hilly. There's like hilly. I don't know what you're going. They're not mountains. They're just hills. There's a lot of hill stuff. Very dry, but there's some stuff that grows. Lots of rocks, lots of dry, a little grass, and every now and then there's a spring. It's a very dry area. So it's near the Dead Sea, 50 miles about west of the Dead Sea. And again, if you go on Google Earth, you'll find in this area, if you type in Man, you'll find Man there, and Carmel is there. Just saying, these are real places, and they've been called that for thousands of years. So. And there's a Mount Carmel too, but that's actually up here, up where Haifa is. So they use the same name. So, but anyway, so we're down here in the south. This is where David's got his hundreds of guys that are with him. They're trying to stay away from Saul, who from time to time sends people down from the north. In fact, the previous chapter, 1 Samuel 24, the previous chapter is that very famous time when David elects not to kill Saul, when Saul's out there with his army. And remember that they go into a cave, and they're hiding in the cave, and then Saul comes in to relieve himself in the cave, and then David sneaks up on him, doesn't kill him, although all his friends say, kill him, it's time to kill him. And David says, no, this guy is in charge of the country, and God put him in charge of the country. I can't just kill him. That's just wrong. God appointed him, but I'll just prove I could have. Remember what he does? Slices off a little piece of the cloth of his, right? And then goes out, and then Saul goes back outside, completely unknowing what just happened. And as Saul's going away from the cave back to his army, David comes out of the cave. Suicide move, by the way, but he comes out of the cave and he waves his piece of cloth around and yells at Saul and says, I could have killed you, but I didn't because you're God's anointed. Know this story? Well, we don't have time for that one too. 1 Samuel 24, go check. But that just happened, and so now we're after that. Now we're back in the south and we're wandering around. Let's talk about the people that are here. We have, I forgot about this. This is exactly what it looks like because this is a picture from that area. So we'll see this a couple times as we go on. It's largely dry, but you see there's little green patches. So if you've got 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, you actually can graze, sort of, in this area. But this area is also rife with robbers and thieves because anyone can hide behind any hill in this area. It's very hard to see someone coming who's going to get you in this area because around every turn, you're hidden. So that's it. When we talk about the Judean hills, this is it. It's this hill country over here, and that's where that's actually taken. I confirmed this in that very area. Okay, the woman was discerning and beautiful. Da-da-da, and her name is Abigail. And Abigail, if you take her name apart, not these abs, which you're not going to see, but Ab is like Abraham, Ab, that means father. So Abigail, there's a father in front, Ab, and then Gail means joy. So it's father, joy. Well, I don't know. It could be, there's a lot of dispute about what it exactly means, but it probably is about the fact that she was her father's joy. That's what it was. So she's named Abigail. Abigail. And the woman was discerning and beautiful. That's going to be an understatement in just a second. Discerning, okay, we'll see that. But beautiful, this word for beautiful is only used for two other women in the entire Bible. One of them's Esther. And the story of Esther, she won a beauty pageant in the book of Esther. And then Rachel, who is the beloved wife that Jacob worked so hard to remember her. So anyway, so she's in a class with two other very famous women in the Old Testament. The woman was discerning and beautiful. And how about this other guy? But the man was harsh and badly behaved, and he was a Calebite. Now, I have permission to use this guy's picture, but I feel bad I'm going to use it all the way this morning. So he was harsh, badly behaved. He was a Calebite. Well, when we say Calebite, you got to remember when the nation of Israel finally came into the promised land, Caleb, who was one of the 12 spies that went into the land, he and Joshua came out and said, we can do this. Yes, there's giants there, but we can do this, not because we're so powerful, but because God's powerful. Caleb and Joshua were the only 2 of the 12 who believed God could do this. The rest didn't believe, and that cost them a whole generation in the desert, 40 years before they got in. So Caleb's one of those. So when we see him come into the promised land, Caleb actually says, you know what, can I just have the land south of Hebron in this Paran area? It's exactly where we are right now. It's this very area. I'll settle there. And so people became known as Calebites. It's not a deleterious phrase. It's just that that's his lineage. He comes from Caleb, who, by the way, is an uber hero in the nation of Israel. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. That's why it's such a contrast right here. Caleb was such a great guy, but this guy, who's related to him, is harsh and badly behaved. And those English words aren't even half strong enough for what a jerk this guy is. So here we go. Let's find out what happens when a woman who's discerning and beautiful is married to a man who's harsh and badly behaved. Well, David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So again, at the end of every agricultural season, not only do you get your crops in, but you also shear your sheep. You know, you finally get to the point where you say it's time to shear the sheep, it's time to make some money. And when they do it, it's a very big operation, especially if you have 3,000 sheep. It's a big, big operation. So it's like a festival for the guy who owns the sheep. It's a really great time. And so when they're shearing the sheep, you have food and you have banquets and the servants are treated well. I mean, it's just a great, great time. There's lots of food. It's a huge celebration. So David, who's in the wilderness with his guys, hears that this is going on. Now, these are sheep that need to be sheared. By the way, those are merino sheep. Those are the best. Those are, merino sheep. Yeah, they get so woolly they can't even see. When you start to shear them, it's like, look, there's a head in there. So there's a head and a neck. So anyway, merino sheep. So it's that time of the year where they're getting ready to actually make some profit based on the wool that's on the sheep. And they're out there doing this incredible thing where there's lots of food and there's celebrations. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, and greet him in my name, and thus you shall greet him this way. This is what I want you to say. Peace to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all you have. It's a wonderful, gracious greeting. And he wants them to go on and say this. I hear that you have shearers. So this is opening to the idea of you guys are having a big celebration right now. Now, your shepherds, their shepherds have been with us. So remember, David and his guys are around the south. Your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. So ask your young men. They'll tell you this is true. So clearly what he's making is a beginning thing here. I mean, here's the celebration going in, the shearing that's going on. And David's saying, listen, when your shepherds were down south where we were, hundreds of armed men, we protected them. We took care of them. It's a dangerous place to be. In fact, we were a protection. We were a wall to them, in fact, from all the dangers that were there. Ask your own guys. They'll tell you we helped them preserve your sheep that you're shearing today. Just ask them. We were really nice. We could have, now think about this. David could have said, I have hundreds of really hungry guys. We could have been picking off your sheep every day just to feed ourselves, but we didn't. We protected your sheep and your shepherds by our care. Why does he mention this? Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we've come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David. So he's asking, can we join in the feast with you? Now, a lot of people say, this sounds kind of like the mafia. So we've been protecting you all this time. I think you owe us something. What do you say? Right? It's what it sounds like. But it's actually not. This is well-respected, honorable tradition. If someone does something for you that results in so much good for you, I mean thousands of sheep, then it's just right. In fact, Nabal should have recognized those guys who were down there and said, why don't you guys come up and join us? Because you are responsible for why we have such a good crop of sheep. So you should come. So Nabal should have invited them. And instead, David comes and sort of invites himself. It's not beyond protocol, and it's actually just fine to do this. But he's reminding Nabal that we did this for you. So can we share in the celebration? So when David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. And they waited. This is an interesting comment, because if Nabal was on top of his game, he would have recognized how indebted he was to David and his armed men. He should have. So at the mention from some of these guys that this is going down, can we join in the celebration? Nabal, if he was not a harsh man, he would have been very hospitable and said, oh, yeah, I forgot you guys. Come on in. There would have been no hesitation. But they waited. That's a bad sign. It's not going to go well. And Nabal answered David's servants, well, who's David? Really, that's a good inflection. Who's David? Who's the son of Jesse? There are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. This is David, the once general of Saul, who now is not working for Saul as general anymore. See, that's what he's saying. They break away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I don't know where? Jerk. He's being a jerk. That's what he is. Now, let's call him on this for a second. Does he really not know who David is? I mean, come on. David's got hundreds of guys with him wandering around the south. Surely his own shepherds came back sometime during the season and said, Master, we were out there with the sheep, and there were all these burly guys. They were really capable, and they had shields and swords and spears, and we thought they were going to kill us. They actually protected us. Right? So he knows who David is. Plus, you go back about 6-7 chapters before this when David's Mr. General for Saul. And look at this. 1 Samuel 18:5. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. That's when he was Saul's general. So that Saul set him over the men of war. All the men of war. He was in charge of Saul's entire army. David was so good. How can Nabal not know who David is? Or the fact that he was so accomplished militarily that Saul put him in charge of all the military. What is Nabal thinking? It goes on. So that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Verse 6, as they were coming home when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, with musical instruments. Verse 7, and the women sang to one another as they celebrated, Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. So, come on. David had a reputation. And Nabal knew his reputation. So when Nabal says something so stupid as, oh, well, who's David? Who's this son of Jesse? He's just being a rhetorical jerk. Is what he is. In fact, he might have been drinking a lot by this time. We don't know. But he's really challenging. He's challenging not only who David is, which is a stupid move. I mean, it's a stupid move. But also, he's challenging generations of the hospitality culture that's part of Israel by doing this. So he's basically saying, why should I give him hospitality? Who is he? Some guy who used to be general, now he's running around the desert? I mean, even if you're a jerk, it's a bad move. It's a bad, and you'll see why right now. It's a very bad move. Who's David? Who's the son of Jesse? Well, we know. So, David's young men turned away, came back and told him all this. Yeah, this is where the mood music goes. Dun, dun, dun. And told David. They told David what he said. And David said to his men, every man strap on his sword. Not going to turn out well. And every man of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. About 400 men went up after David, while 200 men remained with the baggage. Bad translation. It's all their stuff, okay? Because remember, they're kind of roaming around the desert. Someone's got to guard their stuff. So anyway, so how many guys go up with David to Nabal? 400 strong guys with swords. David is really ticked off, which he ought to be. This is against the culture, and Nabal's being a total jerk, just a total jerk. That's right. This is, we love James Jacques Tissot. He was a painter back in the end of the 19th century. This is one of his paintings. This is called The Mighty Men of David, because there's a section back in 1st and 2nd Samuel where they talk about these guys who actually came to him in his distress out there, and they helped him out. There are hundreds of guys. So Tissot thought, I'm going to paint me a picture of what those mighty men would look like. I like them. They're pretty cool. They're pretty cool. Okay, anyway, so David tells them, strap on your swords, guys. We're going. We're going. This is bad. This is why this would be a great movie, see? But now one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife. So one of the guys who sees this going down figures, I got to tell Abigail. Okay, so he goes to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and says, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed at them. That railed is not a great translation. It means basically just totally embarrassed and humiliated them. I mean, it's really bad. It's a really bad term. And he railed at them. Yet, okay, the men were very good to us, talking about the protection they had when they were out with the shepherds. The men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we didn't miss anything when we were in the fields as long as we went with them. These are David's men. They were a wall to us, both by night and by day. All the while, we were with them keeping the sheep. So when they come to Abigail, they say, listen, David sent his guys. And Nabal railed at them. But you got to know about these guys. They were very good to us. Very good and capable, powerful men. And instead of taking advantage of us, which is what the robbers in the desert do, they protected us. They were like a wall to us. They stood guard for us night and day. And those are David's men. And that's who your husband railed against. Not good. Well, what can Abigail do? Now, therefore, know this and consider what you should do. This is them still talking. And consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master, Nabal, and against all his house. And he's such a worthless man that one cannot speak to him. So they're fearing for their lives, and rightly so. And in fact, this is what David's going to do. He's not only just going to kill Nabal, he's going to wipe out the entire house. I mean, everything. He's going to wipe. He is so mad. So when they come to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and says, well, you got to do something about this. And this is wrong because they were good to us, and you got to save us because we would actually talk to Nabal ourselves, but he's such a worthless man. You can't talk to him. Do you know anyone like this? Yeah. Yeah, harm is determined against our master and against all his house. By the way, all his house does indeed include Abigail. It's everybody. David's just ticked. His servants, everything. So you got to do something. But he's such a worthless man, you can't speak to him. I like this because there's several proverbs that talk about how hard it is to speak with worthless people. So I thought I'd just quote a couple of them for you. Proverbs 17:10. A rebuke goes deeper into a man of understanding than 100 blows into a fool. Yeah. Or there's one, actually 2 verses after this. Let a man meet a she-bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. Yeah, I would rather go approach a mama bear who's been robbed of her cubs than go to an idiot like this. So they know you can't reason with this Nabal guy. It's just not going to happen. And so from the servant's perspective, we're toast. We're toast. So Abigail, you're our only hope. You're our only hope. And we don't know if you have any influence at all. You're a good woman, but he's a jerk. He's harsh. He's bad. So I don't know what we can do here. But we can't speak to him. Can you do something? So Abigail made haste, and she took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine and 5 sheep already prepared. They were preparing it for the celebration, and 5 seahs of parched grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on the donkeys. I looked for a picture of something like this. Can't find it. But this is huge. I mean, in fact, what she probably did, it's amazing with this food layout that we've got here. Normally, she couldn't put her hands on that stuff quickly. But they probably put it together for the celebration of the shearing. So she went over to where the celebration was and scooped almost everything up and put it on donkeys. Now, you got to use a little imagination here. I can see her going back to the celebration going on. And Nabal's right there in the middle of the celebration, and all the servants are there, and they're eating and drinking, and it's just a wonderful celebration, stuff like that. And then she starts collecting up all the stuff and putting it on and packing it on donkeys like she's going to take this celebration someplace else. I don't know how she did this without Nabal seeing it because he doesn't seem to be aware of it. But I'm sure if the servants saw her doing it, they might think, okay, if this is going to save our lives, here, have this loaf too. have my raisins, have my figs, have everything. Go. Right? So she collects all this stuff together and lays them on donkeys, basically makes a wagon train of all this food. And she said to her young men, go on before me. Behold, I come after you. So they took off with the donkeys with all this food. This is great food. But she didn't tell her husband Nabal. So somehow she got the food, but she didn't tell Nabal. Why didn't she tell Nabal? Well, he probably wouldn't have agreed with it. Hey, honey, where are you going with all that food on the donkeys? Picnic. No, she'd have to explain what's going on. But somehow he misses it, and she doesn't tell him. Maybe she should have told him, but it would, no, he's an idiot, so it probably wouldn't have worked out really well. Verse 20, and as she rode on the donkey and came down under cover of the mountain, behold, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now, this is fascinating because David's on the warpath, literally, with 400 men with swords. And so if they saw her coming with a wagon train of donkeys and food from a distance, they would be, they'd be alerted to something going down. But what she has to do is gain an audience with David by ambushing he and his army. Whoa. And in this country, you can do that. If you know the country well enough, as David and his hundreds of guys are coming down one of these wadis, these places that have these, as they're coming down one way, she can figure out how to get her donkey train coming the other way so that right at the bottom of the thing, poof, they'll meet. And she has to be confronted by him. And surprise him, actually. Maybe this is her best chance of not being actually taken out by the anger of David, too, because if David saw her from a distance and he could make out who this was, he could say, well, this is going to be easier than we thought. Let's take them out first, and then we'll get to the sharing grounds and take out the rest of Nabal and all those guys. And then actually stage an attack on the donkey train with all this food on it and kill all the servants and Abigail. So she is a discerning woman. She is smart enough that she knows how to ambush the desert fighter, David. This is great. This makes a great movie. She knows enough to be able to surprise David and confronts him as these two wadis come together. This is great. And it's possible. You could actually do this. And David had said, now this is a little history, this is what he had said, surely in vain have I guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him, and he has returned me evil for good. God do so to the enemies of David and Moro. So if by morning, this is his oath, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him. That is, God come down on everybody in the world if I don't kill all of Nabal's house. He's really ticked. He's really mad. So this is the angry man that Abigail decides to ambush in the desert. This is crazy. I mean, who comes close to a band of 400 men who are led by a totally angered man who's out for vengeance, and they've all got swords, and all you got is raisins. You see how crazy this is? She's got the guts and the know-how to confront him, knowing that she can ambush him so she can take him by surprise, and knowing that maybe if I take him by surprise, he won't just lash out and kill us instantly. This woman's got guts, and she's smart. So here we go. She's bringing actually the food that she should have shared with David and his men from the original approach. So there they are. They're armed to the teeth. They're ready to go. So when Abigail saw David, she hurried and got down from the donkey, fell before David on her face, and bowed to the ground. Good move. Because she's in great danger. The first thing she could have done, really, when David goes, oh, where'd you come from? Mr. Desert Fighter? Well, where'd you come from? She could have said, well, we were wrong. Here's all your stuff that you would have in the celebration. Just take this and leave us alone. She doesn't do that. She falls to the ground and basically submits herself to David, and in that posture says, do to me as you will. You're in charge, I'm not. Gutsy woman. Gutsy woman. If I was doing a movie of this, because this is playing in my head like a movie. If I did a movie of this, I'd take the camera back. I'd see David up like this and all of his men grunting kind of with their spears. And then she comes off her donkey. She falls on the ground. Poof, the dust kind of comes up. And then you do what's called a rack focus, where you actually focus back then on all the servants in the back of the donkey train, who when she pops on the ground, go, like we're done for. We're done. Okay, he's going to kill us all. He's going to kill us all. She's not taking any power position at all. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my Lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant." She's saying this while her face is in the dust. She's taking the blame. It's my fault. It's my fault. And I have no place to speak to you, but I'm asking right now, can I say something else? Can I just speak something else? She doesn't come in shouting and yelling or throwing name calling or anything like that. She says, "It's my fault." Her face is in the dirt. And she says, "Now can I say a few words? Can I just say something? Can I speak in your ears? Hear the words of your servant." So she's making herself as his servant. And now we go into probably one of the longest things that has ever been said in the Old Testament by a woman. And here's what she says. "Let not my Lord regard this worthless fellow, Nabal, for as his name is, so he is. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him." In Hebrew, Nabal means fool. Remember we said when you name people in the Old Testament, it actually matches their character? Somewhere in his life, people figured out that Nabal was an idiot and a fool, so they said, "We're changing your name today to Fool."
Why did she marry him?
Why did she marry him? I don't. That's probably one of the biggest questions of all history. Why would a woman like Abigail, who's discerning and beautiful, marry a jerk like Nabal? What? It's got to be a God thing. In fact, we can ask that at the end because it's a very pertinent question. It's a really pertinent question. Why is she stuck with this guy, really? Well, and didn't she know he was a fool when she was introduced to him by the matchmaker and said, right, Abigail, your father's joy, this is fool. Would you marry him, please? I don't know. Anyway, she doesn't defend what he did, nor the fact that he's a fool, that he's living up to his name. She says, "David, I agree with you. The guy's a fool, just like his name. So I'm not going to defend his foolishness, because when a fool does foolish things, he's a fool. So I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to stand here and say to you, David, well, you don't know the kinder, gentler side of Nabal. He's such a wonderful man, when we're at home." She doesn't do that. She could have lied through her teeth and say, "Don't kill him because he's a really nice guy, and you just need to get used to him and get to know him, and you change your mind." Now she's beautiful. She's beautiful. So she could have, looked David in the eyes and flooded her eyes like this. "Oh, David, you don't know Nabal. He's a wonderful guy at home. If you just got a chance to know him, you'd come to love him." And, and she'd do her feminine thing on him. And, of course, David would go, "Ooh." And he would, this entranced thing where you see these things swirling around, and she would have him. She doesn't use her beauty for that at all. Not at all. In fact, as far as we know, he still can't see her face. She's in the dust. She doesn't use, because she's got her face on the ground. She was bowed down to the ground. So maybe somewhere in this process she starts to look up to address him. We're not sure, but I, your servant, that means I'm serving you, David, you're in charge. I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. This is a very honest thing. If the men had come, she probably would have figured out some way to do hospitality for the men without violating her jerk husband's ideas. We don't know. But she's just saying, "Listen, if I had been there, it would be different, but I wasn't there. But here I am now. And I'm your servant. I'm yours. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, my Lord David, as the Lord Yahweh lives, Jehovah, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from saving with your own hand, now then, let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal." There's a trouble right here because this word saving always gets in our way. And if you've got a King James Version, it's better translated. That word's translated avenging. So really what she's saying is the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt, from being guilty of unnecessary bloodshed, and from avenging with your own hand. Because remember in the Old Testament, God says, "Vengeance is mine," says the Lord. So David's ticked because he's been insulted. He's avenging his anger and his disrespect. And now Abigail says, this is great, It's great because the Lord has restrained you from spilling innocent blood. Not, hey, I'm glad I came here because I'm going to stop you from doing something you're going to regret for the rest of your life. She doesn't claim any credit at all. She says, God has restrained you from this endless blood guilt. And now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. That is, David, what you need to do is do what you've always done with your enemies. Let God take care of them. He's just another one of your enemies. Just, don't. But this thing about restraining him from blood guilt, this actually would have been a very sinful thing he did if he took all those men who were there to help David eventually become king of Israel. They were going to go and they were going to completely decimate a house. This man and all of his servants. And for the rest of his life, David would have looked back and said, after he became king, God made him king, he would say for the rest of his life, that was probably the biggest mistake I made in my life. Well, until Bathsheba. David's not a perfect guy. But Abigail is saying to him, whatever's restraining you right now from doing something that you'll deeply regret for the rest of your life, it's because God's doing it and not me. I love Abigail because she's just broadened the picture of the entire conflict. It's not just Abigail, wife of Nabal fool, trying to save her own skin and all the servants in her house and all that kind of stuff. That's not what's going on here. She's taken it to a much larger picture. You see this? You are eventually going to become king of Israel. And one of the best things that could happen when you become king of Israel is to keep people from thinking, because David's in power and he's powerful, we better shape up. Or he'll come to our house like he did to Nabal before he became king, and he'll kill us all too. So we better shape up and obey the king. That would have wrecked his kingdom to know that. And now she goes on, now let this present, this is the donkey train with all the food, let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. So this really is going back on the hospitality thing. So she says, here I've come with all this food. Now notice, I don't think she's giving it to David, she's giving it to the young men. She's not bringing this as a bribe to David. Notice that? She's bringing it to the young. We want to fulfill our hospitality to your young men, because it was your young men who protected our flocks down in the south when they were out there in the regular year. So this is for them. This is for them. So she's just carrying through with the hospitality that should have been in the first. Please forgive the trespass of your servant. Wow. Please forgive the trespass of your servant. I'm sorry, will you forgive me? Now, he could, in his anger, say, nope, sorry, swing.
But he did not.
But he didn't. He didn't do it. And so instead of, I think it's amazing. You could have stopped at verse 27 for me in the narrative and said, I'm here to correct what went wrong. I brought the food. This is for your men who helped us. That's only the right thing to do. Now, please just go away. But she says, forgive me for what I've done. I think that's astonishing. That's astonishing. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord, David, a sure house. That's his kingdom, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord. And evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. So she's looking forward, and she's seeing David as becoming king of Israel. And as becoming king of Israel, she says, God's going to make for you a sure house. A house is his rule, basically, in his kingdom. God is going to do this for you. He's going to make you king. You'll have this rule, and it'll be legendary, this rule that you'll have. And it's because you are doing the Lord's fighting and the battles of the Lord, what the Lord is doing in you, and evil shall not be found in you as long as you live. So here's the deal. She understands, again, she goes back to the big picture. You're going to be king of Israel someday, and you don't want this mar on your record to go in when you become king, because it's going to wreck your entire rule. So she's looking at his rule and his kingdom, not so much just saving your skin. It's a very smart thing she's doing. She's not using this to manipulate him. She's just saying, this is the proper thing to do, and you and I both know it. You will be king of Israel. Now, he was anointed king by the prophet Samuel years before, when David was still living at home. I think many people knew he was going to become king, and she definitely did. So she's saying, listen, for the best of Israel and for you, God's made you king, and when you become king, you don't want this on your record. Wow. So if men rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, The life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. What? Go back to harvest time. You know, you cut wheat or barley, whatever you do, and you put it, and then you tie it into bundles to keep the good stuff, throw away the bad stuff. This is the idea she's saying. It's like you are the collected, valuable thing that God has collected to himself. He's collected you to himself. He's called you king. You're precious to him. You're not the stubble. You're the grain in that sense. You're in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. And men will rise up to pursue you and seek your life, but it's not going to happen because God holds you close in his bundle to his heart. And that's going to be you. So when you're in that position, it doesn't look good for you, David. If this is your relationship with God and becoming king, it doesn't look good when that same person runs off at his anger and kills people because they insult him. That's bad for the kingdom, and it's bad for the reputation of God. God's going to make you king. Don't do this. This is not a godly thing. This is not in keeping with the king that God has anointed in front of me. She still keeps the big picture. This is astonishing. By the way, for some of us guys who are clueless, for all of us guys who are clueless, many times women can get a bigger picture than guys can, especially when they're angry. Just saying, because guys' perspective on life is this big until they get angry, and then it's only this big. It's targeted on the person who's insulted them. Many times women can stand back and say, can I paint the bigger picture for you? And that's all she's doing with David. Not to manipulate him, but to tell him the truth of what's going to happen. It's just great stuff. And the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling. So not only are you a protected life to God, but God will fight your battles, and you don't have to go on the road with 400 angry men with swords, because God will protect you and God will take your enemies. And you know what he'll do with your enemies? What? Says David. You remember that David and Goliath thing? That was David and Goliath in 2 seconds. He's saying just like that sling that you slung that stone out and cast it out, God will take your enemies, put it in there, and fire them away from you. God's protecting you. So you're in a special place with God. It looks wrong for you then to take power in your own hands, to use it for totally selfish purposes right now. God's always and will be the one who's the one who defends you. So when the Lord has done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and he's appointed you prince over Israel, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause, or for my Lord without working salvation himself, working of vengeance himself. She just says the same thing. When God completes his plan for you because you're the anointed king, then you won't have the regrets. See where he says right there? You won't have the regrets, these cause of grief, of pains of conscience, because today you stopped from doing a stupid thing, and God's the one that stopped you from doing it. Not me. I just basically did what I was supposed to do in hospitality. God stopped you today because God's got a plan for you. Listen to God's bigger picture. I love this woman because I don't know how to say this well. In men, there's something about their ambitions and something about their goals in life. There's something the way men are made, like Prince Charming or the knight in armor and all that kind of stuff, where men want to have a goal, and they want to place all their ambitions and all their power and all their direction on accomplishing this one thing and winning this one thing. And what she's saying to him is, God has done that for you already. He's told you where you're going. He's told you who you're going to be. It's not of your own making, David. You're not an ambitious man in that sense. God's got this plan for you, and this plan is in place. Don't wreck it by being stupid David today. Do it by being the king that he anointed in your dad's house years ago. Okay? She speaks truth, and she speaks for his benefit. And when the Lord, she's still talking, when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, when God has that basically means you become king. When the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant. Just remember your servant. That's all I ask. Just remember me when you become king. Just remember that as your servant, this is what I did for you today. That's all. That's all. So David said to Abigail, no, I don't buy it. Your husband's a jerk. Kills them all. That's the alternate ending that does not exist in history. Here's what David said. He's really quite taken by this display. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to me. Isn't that great? He doesn't say, hubba, hubba, what a woman. Why don't I have one like this? He doesn't say that. He recognizes God's hand in bringing her here. And if it weren't for the fact that she was so humble while she's doing this, it would lose a lot of the power of the thing. She just placed herself in God's hands. God brought her to this point, and she did what she did through God working through her. And God did this in her, and David sees this in her. It's not her. It's not Abigail. It's God working in Abigail. You see it? He says it. He recognizes. God sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from blood guilt and from working vengeance with my own hand. God sent you here today. God's the one who's behind all this. Basically, thank you, Abigail, for letting God use you. Because I was about to do something really stupid. And would probably undermine his entire king rule. Because he would be known as a jerk with swords. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you. See, so that's how we know it wasn't just going to be the male people in the household. It was everybody, including Nabal's wife. Everybody is going to die. But God of Israel lives. He's restrained me from hurting you. Unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning, there had not been left to Nabal so much as a one male. They would all be dead. It's a good thing you moved quickly, is what he's saying. See that? It's a good thing you got up and moved. Ooh. Didn't think about it. Because if you hadn't, everyone would be dead in a short amount of time. That's how close it got cut right here. I mean, really close. She went into action just like that. She knew what she needed to do. And God was leading her every step of the way. It's a good thing you did that, because no one would be left in the morning. Then David received from her hand what she had brought him, all the figs and the raisins and the bread and all that stuff. And he said to her, go up in peace to your house. See, I have obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition. So he agrees with her. But he says something really curious here. He says, go up to your house, which is, if you could have just run away from my little mini army that's coming and gone just anywhere else but your house. Don't go to your house, because you're going to die if you go to the house. He says, no, it's safe for you to go home now. It's safe for you to go home. And you'll be in peace. You're okay. Wow. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house like the feast of a king. So you didn't have stuff to share with all those guys? No, he's eating it all himself. Like a feast of a king, and Nabal's heart was merry within him because he was drunk. Not only is he hard to deal with when he's sober, but he's really hard to deal with when he's drunk. It kind of looks like this, I think. That's what's going up back at the house. So when she sees that, she told him nothing at all until the morning light. She figured, I'm going to wait till he sleeps this one off, and then I'll tell him. But this is interesting to me. Why would she even tell him? If I was her, I would just kind of not ever say anything. Because David's guys are turning around and going back. They're going away. The day is saved. Nabal's no more the wiser. Let's just not even bring it up. So why would she bring it up? Well, it tells me something about her integrity as well. Because she does eventually have to tell her husband, honey, I took all the celebration food. And because of that, and because of God's leading in my life with that food, you're alive today. Now, I don't think she would do this to kind of give herself credit. I think she's just being honest that she needs to fill in her husband on what's gone down. And it could very well be an investment in him turning around from being fool and being a nice guy. You just never know. But she's going to do now a very risky thing like she did with David. It was risky for her to ambush David and 400 guys in the desert for swords. It's risky for her to tell her what she did to Nabal. He could kill her. Now maybe she's hoping that once she tells Nabal that, by the way, you're alive because of what I did, so don't kill me, it'll save my life. But I don't think Nabal thinks that well. I think he would probably get mad and say, you evil, evil woman, and kill her. That could very well happen. I mean, it could very well happen. So she holds her breath. She waits until the morning when he's sober. Here we go. In the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. I mean, it's like, we don't know what it was, maybe a stroke or something, but she told him, and he went, ah! But he was still alive. Ah! Wow. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Who struck Nabal? The Lord did. He was really protecting Abigail. He was protecting Abigail. First he goes stiff as a board, and then his heart's still beating. And she's wondering, what if he comes out of this? And as soon as he comes out of it, he tells the servants, kill her. For 10 days, she has to trust that the Lord's going to protect her something. And 10 days later, he's dead. Wouldn't this make a great movie? Yeah, right. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be the Lord who has avenged the insult that I received at the hand of Nabal. Remember, vengeance is mine, says the Lord, and has kept back his servant, David, from wrongdoing. The Lord has returned the evil of Nabal on his own head. Don't tell me that God's not a God of justice, because he really is. Now, it may not happen in our lifetimes, but it will happen. But God is a God who's concerned about justice. And so she takes Nabal out. And David sees that that's what God is. God has returned evil on Nabal on his own head. And we've seen this in the Psalms already. We've seen it, I think, a couple times, where basically the writer of the Psalms, sometimes David says, I could lash out against these guys, but you know what? Evil itself will take them down. So I don't have to worry about it. Gee, I don't know any occasions where that happened in the Old Testament. Oh, I do, right there. Right there, it happens. Evil itself is not a healthy way to live. So then David spoke to Abigail to take her as his wife. Woohoo! And when the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, David has sent us to you to take you to him as his wife. And she rose and bowed with her face to the ground, bowed with her grace to the ground, face to the ground. This is a really humble thing to say. And said, behold, your handmaid is a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. She didn't say, I'm going to be queen someday. She says, no, I'm going into the house of David to be like someone who washes the feet of the servants. Humble heart. A woman who understands that it's not about trying to gold dig and find guys who are going to be kings to do it. She just says, I want to be there and serve you. That's all I am. That's my greatest hope. I'll just serve. Wonderful woman. And Abigail hurried and rose, mounted a donkey, and her 5 young women attended her. She had lots of stuff. And she followed the messengers of David and became his wife. The end. Everything turned out happy. So were you watching for signs of how Abigail demonstrated the character of God? Because there's just tons of them right here. I made a short list, and you will probably continue to add to this list as you go away, because it's about 5 or 6 things. Because stories like these are very portable. You now know the entire story of Abigail, and Nabal, the fool, and David, the almost king, and the anger that he can bring with all. You know the entire story. And you will, if you're like me, be sitting somewhere thinking through the story and go, oh, wait, look at that. These stories are very portable, and just because they're such strong narratives, you'll start to understand more and more about the nature of God through how he lived through Abigail. So I just made a few, and you can make more to your list. She assumed the blame. She assumed the blame. Well, part of the blame was hers. It wasn't just Nabal's. She couldn't just stand behind the fact that he was a fool. She also was in charge of hospitality in the house. She assumed the blame, and she didn't try and skirt the blame, but she assumed the blame altogether. There was no shouting on her part. In fact, she actually had to ask to speak. Now, I'm going to put in a little male-female note right here. Ladies, you got to understand that guys never change when you shout at them. It's not just because the guys are Nabals, although we sort of are, but it's because there's something the way we're built. There's something the way we're built. And this comes out as a theme throughout the entire Old and New Testament. There's something the way men are built that when women use more and louder words with them, the men become more resistant to change. I'm not making excuses for anybody, but that's the way it is. However, there is something extraordinarily powerful in the life of a man for what a woman can do, and it's based on her actions. not based on her words. I'm just saying. That's just true. I'll go to my grave claiming that because that's just very true. So in this particular case, she knew that if she yelled at him or shouted at him, he would instantly resist. She knows men. So she says, "Can I speak?" And what she did was she saved Nabal from himself. Nabal was a jerk. Nabal was a fool. And she was interceding on his behalf, even though she had no love for the man, and she knew that he was a Nabal. She knew that he was a fool. Why would anyone put their lives in jeopardy for someone who's a fool and doesn't love you? But Abigail did. She also saved David from himself. You see how influential she is when men are jerks? And all she did was what she did. Her actions spoke much louder than words in this particular case. She had to ask to speak, and she explained a little bit. But I don't think that's the lion's share of her power over David and Nabal. What really was the lion's share of her power is what she did. That's what really did the thing. Here's these two powerful men getting ready to have war in the desert. And her gifts didn't come as a bribe. They came as gifts of grace. She did not have to do this. She chose on her own free will to give to the angry, almost king guy with 400 swords in the desert, and at risk of angering her own husband, who put together a feast at his own pocketbook. She took great risks here. But she brought this fruit as a gift, not as a bribe. And she also broadens the picture, and she speaks of God's good in David's life. She speaks about what God has done in his life and what he's going to do in your life, and that's the plan for you. Don't be a jerk. Don't be enabling all this kind of stuff. She broadens the picture. And lastly, I use that as a general thing. She uses God's bigger picture, God's plan for David. And that's influential on David, not because she's trying to manipulate him, but because she's causing him, in the blindness of his anger, to recognize the facts from God's perspective. That's extraordinarily powerful. Extraordinarily powerful. It's just extraordinarily powerful. So now I think your list is probably much longer. In fact, my list is about 3 times this long. But when I look at this list right here, you know who I see in the New Testament? I see Jesus, who is the outshining of the nature and character of God. She is acting like God would, in a loving, sacrificial way, putting her own self in danger, and in humility offering what both of these men needed, salvation for themselves, and she does it at risk to herself. Wow. David recognizes it's not because Abigail's smart. Abigail says it's not because I'm smart. The changing factor in the entire story was God interceding through Abigail. This is why I subtitled this Made in the Image of God. Because Abigail is one of the strongest reflections of the nature and character of God in a most sacrificial context and in a dangerous context and in a redemptive context for everyone involved. She saved not only David from this kind of wreck that he was going to do, she saved Nabal from what David was going to do. She saved all the servants in the household because she was willing to put herself in a sacrificial position. She saved everybody. And she was the only one without a sword. So ladies, you are as much made in the image of God as men are. Don't let any man tell you different. Because in Genesis it says God made them, male and female, both of them in his image. And here is a perfect example of Abigail made in the image of God, who's walking and acting just like God would do in this context. And ladies, you can do the same thing everywhere you're at. And in the most powerful ways. You actually, when God is moving you to intercede in situations of conflict, he can use you to turn around angry men with 400 swords and deal with the utter failure of a fool like Abel. And he can do that to you. Isn't Abigail a great story? Deborah she's right up there with her. Deborah's in Judges. I mean, I just got to tell you, when we talk about how God deals with men and women in the Old and New Testament, God is one of the biggest proponents of women anywhere in the entire ancient world or the present world. And because they are faithful to God and led by God in ways that you would never really think could be powerful, God uses them in extraordinarily powerful ways when they listen to his leading. Now let me paint one picture of the opposite. I always do this when I study stuff. What would happen if Abigail did everything opposite to what she said she did? She could have run away, when that servant came to her and said, listen, David's coming. He's got all these guys in the desert. We're all going to die. She's okay, I'm out of here. And she'd be gone. I'm going to save my own skin. She could have done that. And sacrificed in the process Nabal and the entire household. And she'd come back the next day and everything's just burning and just dead, She could have done that, just saved her own skin. She didn't do that. She didn't save her own skin. She looked at the needs of others first. She could have, when she come to David, lie about who Nabal was. I already did a stupid reenactment of that. And she could have, with her beauty and charm David into turning him around and, just please don't do that. He's a lovely man and I love him. She doesn't do that. There's just a whole bunch of scenarios, and you'll work on this later when you think about Abigail. She could have done so many other things in the process as it went along, and she decided not to. Instead, she placed herself as a servant in front of David, gave him all the control, and said, this is what I should do, and I'm doing this for you. Listen to God. Here's the big picture in your life. She did what she did at great risk to herself. And she could have done everything differently if her prime goal was saving her own skin. But her goal was not to save her own skin. It was to save everybody involved, including David and the danger. So ladies, I just want to encourage you, especially on Mother's Day, I got to tell you, what your mothers did and showed you in their lives as you were growing up was much, much powerful than whatever they ever said. Now, they can explain what they do in words, but it's the actions that have great, great power. And in Abigail's case, she just demonstrates it so perfectly for us. Actions have great power, especially if it's not all about self-preservation. Especially if it's not about self-preservation. So if you're in a situation, now I'm speaking to the ladies, if you're in a situation, whether it's with kids or in-laws or with anybody, and you're saying, God, this is just wrong. There's a jerk. There's a jerk. I don't know what to do about all this kind of stuff. I've shouted to him all my life. I've shouted at him. What can I do right now so that, like Abigail, you through me can act in such a way that they cannot miss the character of God and his loving kind? How will you lead me right now on what that is? First off, just tell God it's not about me preserving myself. It's not about that. But it's got to be all about the good of the people that are involved. But God, I don't know what to do. And all the talking I've done in my entire life is not making any difference here. Yeah. What can I do to demonstrate your loving kindness and take your grace and put it into action and tilt the apple cart of all the animosity? Because that's what she did. So that's why we're going to sing this last song, and it's got this chorus in it. Let my deeds outrun my words. Let my life outweigh my songs. What you do has powerful impact on the people in your life. And Abigail is the most powerful example of someone in a powerless position being used by God to overpower everybody. She is her father's joy, and she's ours. So worship team, if you guys will come up, and we'll sing this in a second, and we'll close the morning. Lord, we thank you for this incredible story. We pray that through your Spirit you'd continue to reveal to us as we mull it around our heads and reflect on the nature of what goes on, that you would use this to continue to teach us about who you are, and especially who you are when you live and breathe and walk through those that are around us. And Lord, we want ourselves to be those same kind of people as Abigail, to be people who are intent on being led and empowered by you, not just for our good, but actually for the good of those that are around us. What you do in and around and through us, through what we do, is a plan that totally escapes us, and yet you do it. So our hearts are yours. Use us in powerful ways in the lives of others, and take out of the front frame of our concerns about ourself and our self-preservation, our self-image, and all those kinds of things. Lord, we see two men in this story who at the moment were all about themselves, and a woman who wasn't, and how that changed everything because you led her. Oh, it's astonishing. So thank you for this story now. Use it to continue to change our understanding of who you are. And we thank you for it now in Jesus' name. Amen.